see you guys in the dark.
I'm a 16-year-old male, and I don't usually partake in any sports. I'm a computer programmer, gamer, and avid comic book movie enthusiast. That being said, to compensate for my lack of physical activity, I work out at least 4 times a week to maintain a good physique. I have a membership at my local 24-hour gym. I started going about 2 years ago. It's a pretty big establishment. They have multiple floors, but I usually spend my time on the main floor, which has a spacious room with all the workout equipment that you could want. I usually do a full body workout when I go, so I tend to use all of the equipment. That being said, about last week this started. After I finish my cardio, I go down to the padded area where people typically do their ab workouts. I start getting going through my routine. I'm in the middle of doing my plank, and I noticed a guy staring at me. He was on my right-hand side and was wearing glasses. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and wrote it off as him looking at something else, as I couldn't really see his actual eyes. After I proceed to my next exercise, he quickly leaves my head until I get doing my squats. That's where he is obviously staring at me. His head was turned in my direction when there was nothing else to look at. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just thinking about something. That thought was completely diminished when he came over, and without solicitation, touched me, proclaiming that I wasn't doing my squats right, which of course I knew was complete bullcrap. At this point, he has his hand on my glutes. Let me just say that you can clearly tell I'm underage. I don't look a day over 15. Everything about this situation was just wrong, and I knew it. I was honestly paralyzed. After I snapped out of it, I thanked him and told him that I got it. He smiled with the most perverted and creepy smile ever. He goes back to his area and continues to stare me down like a hawk stalking its prey. I stupidly don't report him. I don't tell anybody about the situation. I was just perturbed nonetheless. I go back the next day and I pray that he isn't there, but lo and behold, I see him sitting around with his creepy sunglasses. When he sees me, he smiles creepily at me and then waves. I don't reciprocate at all. I wanted to avoid all confrontation with this guy. Anyways, I do my cardio without incident, and when I get to the padded area, he doesn't happen to be there, but in the middle of my workout, the guy plops down next to me and asks, "Hey buddy, how often do you come to the gym?" I was honestly startled and responded with a slurred, "When I can." I put back in my earbuds and hoped that would give him the signal that I had no interest in conversing with him. I start doing my push-ups, and out of the corner of my eye, the creep is just laying there, analyzing me. He then decided to give me an anatomy of the bicep. He started touching my arm. He was almost caressing it. I just awkwardly said okay. I was trying to be as cordial as humanly possible, since I didn't want to retaliate and potentially mischaracterize him. I go to this gym often, and I didn't want to develop a reputation. He then started putting his hand towards my genitalia, and that's when I sprung up and just left. The people around me looked disconcerted, and one woman went up to me, asked if I knew this man, to which I replied to her no. I still don't report the guy, as I feared that I misunderstood what he was doing, and he was trying to just help me. The next couple of days went by. I didn't see him at all. But yesterday is when things escalated to a point where I knew this guy had malicious intentions. I'm back at the ab workout area, and this guy doesn't confront me at all, but has his phone pointed at me in a suspicious way. It looked as if he was trying to take pictures of me, of recording me. I was freaked out, but I couldn't say anything because of all I knew he was just reading an article or something. I was unsettled, but continued my workout. This isn't even the worst part. After my workout, I go to wash my hands in the locker room. People who happen to be in there have a tendency to walk around naked, which I find to be really repulsive, but there's no rule against it. So the sick creep is in the locker room, and I curse myself under the breath while I'm washing my hands. This bastard came literally right behind me and says, "After workout, you should shower. Come with me, I'll help you." I tell him to go fuck himself, and then I'm reporting him to the gym and the police. Everyone else in there hears this, and I don't know what happened to him in there as I hauled ass out of there as quickly as possible. I do act according to my threat and report him to the gym, but I didn't have a name, and there are no cameras in the locker room, so the only evidence I have is him touching me in the gym. I tell my father, and he is infuriated. My father goes to the same gym, and when I described the guy to him, my father said that he recognized who I was talking about. He said that the guy is always talking to younger people in the gym, and has always creeped him out. Anyways, the last few times I went to the gym, I did not see this guy. His gym membership was promptly suspended, and the police report is still pending, so it'll be a little bit before we get a response. But that did not deter him from sticking around the area. Let me just say very quickly that this gym is in a shopping plaza, and there are restaurants everywhere outside. Also huge lounge chairs for people to sit in. Why is this significant? It's because I noticed the guy was sitting on a bench directly outside the gym. As I shit you not, on my way into the gym, this guy waves at me. An extremely important detail that I left out of the story was that I had mild Asperger's. Therefore, I can come across as socially awkward sometimes. And this instance has no exception. As a matter of fact, it was worse. I just ran into the gym and reported that same guy was outside waving at me. They called security, but in almost a banal fashion, he was gone before security had the opportunity to reprimand him. I really hope that I don't see this dude ever again. When I was 16 years old, I played in a band with some friends from school. Our drummer, Randy's family, lived at the top of a mountain about 10 miles out of town, and we had been practicing in a little building on their property to avoid the noise complaints we would surely get in town. The mountain was a labyrinth of unpaved roads, and the few houses were separated from each other by stretches of dense forest. I had met a few of Randy's neighbors, and they mostly seemed like normal people who just wanted to live closer to nature. However, Randy's stepdad, Jack, who happens to be a 6'5", tattooed ex-biker, warned us that he had heard stories of people moving there to hide their drug operations deep within the woods. Around this time, I had started dating a new girl, but because of her strict family, we had only been able to see each other at school. However, it turned out that she had a friend who lived in the same mountain as Randy. She decided to sleep over at her house on a Friday, so that I could come see her there after practice. I passed the directions that she gave me on to Randy, and while he seemed uncertain about them, he agreed to help me find this house. After band rehearsal broke up that Friday, Randy and I got in my car and started trying to follow my girlfriend's directions. After the first couple of turns, we were on a road lined with tall trees that completely blotted out on the moonlight. We were supposed to turn off on that road somewhere, but between the darkness and my girlfriend's vague directions, we had no idea which of the several narrow paths leading further into the woods was the right one. After a few minutes, we decided we must have missed the road, so I turned around and looked at the first house that I saw to take another look. Once again, we couldn't decide which road was the one that we were looking for. Not wanting to take a wrong turn and end up in the middle of someone's private property in the dead of night, we turned around at another house to make one more pass. It wasn't long after that I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a pair of headlights closing in quickly, much more quickly than was reasonable at this rough dirt road in the pitch darkness. I mentioned this to Randy, but he waved it off. Probably just some crazy redneck, he said, not exactly easing my nerves. Just let him pass us. I slowed to a crawl, pulled as close to the side of the road as I safely could, waiting on the car to pass me. Instead of going around, though, it got right to my bumper. At this point, we were starting to panic, and I was becoming convinced that we had somehow pissed off one of the drug dealers that Jack had warned us about. I sped up, and the car kept pace with me. When I accelerated even more, they finally passed. But rather than continuing on, the driver performed a perfect bootleg turn, sliding to a stop a few yards ahead, just facing my car with their high beams on. Needless to say, Randy and I were losing it, screaming random obscenities for a few seconds before either of us was able to think straight. Summoning a driving skill I didn't know that I had, I threw the car into reverse, floored it, somehow managed to get around in the direction of Randy's house without ending up in a ditch. I think I took the other driver by surprise, because we had a pretty good head start before he took off in pursuit. At the speed that we were going, it only took a couple of minutes to get back to Randy's house, but the other car tailed us the whole way. We whipped into the driveway, almost jumping out of my car before it had stopped. The other vehicle, which I could now see as a police car with the lights and markings removed, slid to a stop behind us, blocking us in. Randy and I sprinted for the front door and did the only thing that we could think to do in our panicked state. We yelled for Jack to come and save our asses. Jack, who was sitting in his recliner, watching TV and wearing only a pair of shorts, calmly got up, walked out to the front porch. As he did so, a chubby old man, probably in his late 50s, climbed out of the other car, but immediately stopped behind the open door when he saw the big, half-naked biker dude who was now standing between him and us. It only took a couple of questions from Jack, who was a nice guy, but scary as hell when he wanted to be, before our pursuer was reduced to stammering nervously. It turns out that, unknown to me, both times I had turned around, it had been in his driveway. After seeing my headlights for the second time, he decided to chase us down, assuming we were up to something illegal. After explaining himself, he angrily informed us that he was a retired state trooper, and that he had radioed for the police to come and arrest us for trespassing. He then jumped back into his car and took off. Unsurprisingly, no police ever arrived, and we ended up laughing the whole thing off as a random encounter with a crazy but harmless old man. Still, it was enough to scare me into not venturing too far from Randy's house again, especially when I was on that mountain. I'm telling a story that my boyfriend had told me. He had a few brushes with death aside from this story. Ever so often he wonders how he's still alive, and I just remind him of stories like this. One day my boyfriend and I got on the topic of angels, and general spiritual things, as we both believe that there is more than just coincidence. And as he is Native American and embraces his heritage, he fully believes in the spiritual unexplained. And he had elaborated further on a story he had told me a while ago about a trip to the ATM. He was in one of the neighboring towns, taking money out from his bank account. I must add that this was in broad daylight, so you can imagine the decline of the once beautiful town to what it became. Drugs and crime. It's a shame. But as he was standing there waiting for his money to come out, a man came out of nowhere behind him, didn't say a word, and stabbed him in the stomach with a large knife. Took his money and left him for dead. This is when my boyfriend discovered he had hemophilia, by the way, so this was even more life-threatening. He laid there on the street, bleeding to death. And out of nowhere, a tiny elderly woman appeared out of seemingly nowhere, rushed over to him and tried to keep him talking, in semi-alert for a minute, then ran into the nearest restaurant, grabbed a handful of napkins, and pressed them firmly as possible onto his wounds, so that it would help stop the blood from pouring out. He was able to call his friend to come get him, and take him to the hospital as he was young, and didn't want to hear it from his parents. Personally, he should have played it safe, and called an ambulance. But as long as he got help somewhere, that's all that matters. They were able to stop the bleeding and bandage him up. The weird thing is that what he told me is, he said that he's never seen the lady ever before in his life, and he never saw her again afterwards. She basically vanished in broad daylight. I honestly believe that if she never helped him when she did, he would be dead. I'm not too sure of his age at the time, but I'm fairly certain that he was 16. He's 24 years old now, and still has a big scar from where the knife was ripped out.